Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad with Capitalism Hits Home, a show brought to you by Democracy at Work. Please go to www.democracyatwork.info and sign up and join us. Get news about new releases, new merchandise, anything and everything else that we have to convey, more shows, and also be part of our operation. We want to thank you, and I want to thank you personally for both donating money to allow us to continue, but also for being part of us, for listening, for sharing this show. We appreciate it enormously. Today, I want to continue what I talked about last time. I want to continue talking about what's going on in the United States and how it's registered in people's personal lives. And the thing that I talked about last time was the corruption that happens in an unregulated, enormously unregulated, although not totally, but too much unregulated capitalist system in which wealth is rewarded. Jeff Bezos has the most dangerous, well, not anymore, he's not in it, but Amazon has the most dangerous warehouses in the United States. There are more injuries. And they fight unionization, which would allow their workers to have protection. But Bezos is rich, so he's included as a very important person, as is Elon Musk, in spite of his destructiveness. If in America, however you got your money, Trump got his money from his daddy, Elon Musk from his father, a gem mining owner in Africa. Can you imagine the working conditions of his workers? And our media is owned by them. Twitter is owned now by Elon Musk. The Washington Post is privately owned by Bezos. So is Time Magazine. Billionaires own Time Magazine, Fortune Magazine, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe. And they're very important people because they own things, because they have money, not because they're good people or do good things either. Those values are just immoral, and most Americans would really probably agree. They're immoral, unethical, and that affects all of us living amidst such stealing and unethical behavior. Last time I talked a little bit about one of the recent horrible pollutions, the one in East Richmond, Indiana, that allowed at that plastics factory where people were poisoned by the thousands of measures of plastic that burned, releasing deadly chemicals. Well, the same thing happened February 23rd. Not that anything was done about it, but Norfolk Southern Railroad had a problem. One of its engineers called in that bearings were overheating, but they told him to keep going. Keep going because they were saving money. If they had to stop that cargo freight train and go out there and repair the wheels, well, they would have lost money, of course. They're now losing life. But for a capitalist, that's a kind of easy decision. You risk losing life to save money. The people of East Palestine are being poisoned. The fire that happened because of the chemicals that caught fire spilled vinyl chloride, dioxin, butyl acetate in clouds of smoke that were breathed in and became part of the air of East Palestine. It became part of the water supply. 40,000 fish died right after this happened. Even though their income was up 8% for the last several years. They'd had a very bad safety record, the worst for freight trains, and they laid off people to make even more money and had them work later hours because life quality or life itself versus money. You know what you choose if you're a capitalist whose point in life is making more money, more than your competitors, so you can get ahead. They had the worst safety record of any of the freight companies, and yet they were not punished. Investigations are made now because thousands of people are poisoned, but they weren't made before. And another example I want to give you of what capitalist greed does to people, how it suspends their compassion, their care, is child labor. One of the things that's happened is illegal child labor, because child labor is illegal in the United States. It has been since the 30s. But there's been a 69% increase in child labor since 2018. That's pretty impressive. Minors, that means I'm not talking about the kind in the mines, but younger people who are under 18 are employed in 20 states, and not only by unknown, strange little corporations, by J. Crew, Hyundai, General Motors, Ben & Jerry's, and the meatpacking industry. It's not illegal for a young person to work at 14 or 15, but they're not allowed to work in dangerous jobs the way they're doing, or to work too many hours, or to work at night. They're not allowed to do night shifts. And so that's a particular violation. It's a violation to have kids under 14 working, and yet they are. We're seeing manufacturers employing little kids. The little kids that they're employing are mainly migrant children who have arrived without adults. These kids have often walked hundreds of miles. They're going to a country where they don't know people. A third of them are off the radar. They're not kept track of. Many more are taken on by people who say they'll be patrons and force the kids to work and give them money. They're in food manufacturing, food processing, working for brands we all know, Tyson, Cargill, the major meat companies. One in particular is remarkable, where they hire immigrant children to clean the slaughterhouses at Packers. They go in at night, even though children are forbidden to work at night or long hours. They work all night cleaning the blood and guts on the floors of the meat processing industries. They're supposed to be going to school, but if they go at all, they fall asleep. They're often under pressure to support themselves because they're not supported properly, and also to send money at home because it's so much harder for adults to get into the United States than children, that their families in Guatemala and Honduras need the money. They need the paycheck. The United States doesn't really keep track of migrant kids. That's why they're in dangerous situations. They're lifting heavy boxes in the Hyundai and Kia factories. They're cleaning up slippery guts in packing plants. And there are already 8 bills to weaken child labor protections in Midwestern states like Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, Ohio, and North Dakota. They want to let children work at construction sites, which are particularly dangerous. 10 states have introduced legislation to roll back protections for children. How could you put children in danger and not have compassion? How could you deny them the educational opportunities that would give them at least a ghost of a chance here? Well, the answer is there's more profit that way. And in a system of capitalism where profit is the goal, you feel you are a good citizen because you're making money. And the more you make, the better you are. Trump, as part of his appeal, strutted around saying, I'm rich, as if that were a wonderful qualification, rather than, I care about people. I want to give people opportunities. I want a society where everyone has a chance. What has happened is that young people have fewer and fewer chances as our society gets more and more corrupt, so that younger people will not make the money their parents did. Not that all their parents were rich either, but, it used to be that every generation of people earned more than their predecessors, not each individual, but by and large they did, at any rate. So what does this do, this lack of compassion? Well, it makes people feel ripped off and unhappy and unsafe. Security is one of the most important things for people. They need to know they're in a secure place. But life is more and more precarious. In the 1950s, before the McCarthy era and at the McCarthy era, 35% of Americans were unionized, where they couldn't be fired for nothing, where they couldn't be overlooked for promotions without litigating it and pushing it, where they had some kind of safety on the job. Now there's only 12% that have that safety. That's why more and more people are unionizing, because they're realizing we're in a class society. The employer class just cares about money. You're in the employee class. You better band together because together you have power, and alone you don't. And so that is a factor. In addition, 18% of Americans are homeless. I mean, that sounds like too many, but if you look it up on Google, that's what it says. And many more pay more than a third of their income on rent because their landlords, if they raise the rent, they can make more money. And what is someone's security? And the fact that they've lived and paid in that apartment for many years, what does that count up against more money for you? And money is prestige and power in this capitalist society. People need security. And since 18% of Americans are homeless, that's very insecure. And since people are paying more than a third of their income for rent, that's insecure. The threat of homelessness hovers. I saw the pictures of children who are homeless. And the way kids usually make a picture is they have a flat line, which is the ground, if they're about 8 years old. Then they make a house on that flat ground. They have a tree on that line in the ground and maybe some birds, little V's in the sky. But homeless children don't. The house is in the air. The tree is in the air. There's nothing that's stable in their lives. And that's what's happening to more and more Americans. Because if they're not homeless, there's the threat of homelessness. As I've said before, there is no city, state, or county in the whole United States where two people making minimum wage could afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Wow. And so people are frightened and insecure. That's one of the reasons they buy guns, even though guns lead to death, as I've talked about before. And so we have a real problem here. We have a problem on every level of basic stability and mental health. And those problems include addiction. We have a huge addiction problem. They also include mental illness. I live in the city of New York. If I take a walk for more than 10 blocks, I'm sure to see somebody raving mad on the street because people are driven mad by their insecurity and fear. Another symptom is homicide. America has a level of homicides that other European countries and Scandinavia don't have, partly because of the proliferation of guns. Also, suicide. Suicide rates are up, particularly for males. 4 times as many males kill themselves as females, partly because females' attempts usually include pills or something where you get a chance to be saved if someone finds you, whereas if you shoot yourself in the head, you're done. So suicides, homicides, all of these breakdowns. Now, it's very important for us to know that this isn't necessary, that other countries have done something about it, and we can too. Right now, in France, and for the past weeks, 4 million people have taken to the streets because Macron, their leader, has tried to raise the age of retirement from 62 years old to 64 years old. You have to work 30 years to retire, and he wants to raise the retirement age. Of course, women often have to work more than that because they take time off for their maternity leaves. They take longer than males do for their paternity leaves. Also, women are more likely to work part-time because they're doing the domestic labor. And so they're working even more. But why are people in the streets? Because they know that if they stand up there alone, nobody will listen. But if they have 4 million people in the streets, they better listen. The same is happening in Iran, where women particularly, have been horribly discriminated against. And they're out in massive numbers, even though over 1,000 people have been murdered by the police, and the prisons are bursting. In Chile and in Colombia, they just won socialist elections for the first time in forever, because they realized that we have to have a system that is not the capitalist system. So greed is not rewarded. Now, how did they do it? How did all these people do it? Well, in France, which is the one I know most about, there's a new party that formed a few years ago called France Insoumise, France Unbowed, and the head of it is a man named Mélenchon. He's the leader. And what he's done, with the help of millions of others, is create an organization that includes the left labor movement, and fringe labor unions are very powerful, and they're organized along political lines. So they have communist unions, socialist unions, and middle of the road capitalist unions. But they are powerful and enormous, and they have joined, along with climate activists, along with feminists, along with the equivalent of Black Lives Matter activists, along with sexual rights activists, to form a mass group of people who stand up for their rights. The United States hasn't had that since they criminalized socialism and communism in the 50s. The left has never recovered. It's only starting now, as people are unionizing more and more, and not only blue-collar, white-collar, the 48,000 people who won their union struggle in the California university system, or who are right now, the 9,000 who are right now winning it at Rutgers. And one of the ways they're winning is they are doing what the French and the Colombians and Chileans did, which is they are not allowing themselves to be divided. So the full professors are joining, even though their salaries are better. They're joining the adjuncts, the part-timers, the research assistants, the student volunteers. And they're all at Rutgers, they also struck on the issue of allowing students to graduate without paying their fees, because they shouldn't be held back from graduation just because of money. In the California system, one of the things they championed was student housing at a low cost, because so many of the students, even at prestigious schools like Berkeley, California, are homeless and go couch surfing in order to survive and pay tuition. And so you have a unity of all the people who are affected, which is our strength. We have the mass of people who make this society work, who build the street, who clean the street, who build our houses, who keep our schools going, who keep our roads going, who make life. Look around you. Everything is made by people. If we band together, we'll win. France is working up to a general strike, and so is Iran, where everyone stops working and the government has to change. We need that in America. We need a left. In the 50s, just for being members of the Communist Party or being suspected as members of the Communist Party or affiliated, you could get deported or you could be jailed for as much as 20 years. Whereas the January 6th, who actually tried to overturn the government election, are getting at the most about 6 years. They really came after the labor movement. We can't let them happen again. We can't let that happen again. We have to have a left that joins, regardless of what pronouns we use, which is important, but it's not the issue. The issue is class, the basic issue we all share, along with all the other valid issues, is that the people who do the work should get the rewards, not the people who inherit and own stuff. That's not fair. Co-ops should be our way of economic functioning, where the people who do the work make the decisions of what money to have, how to spend it, what to do to expand, and so on. And that is happening in Humboldt, California, is a city of co-ops. And it's a much more humane way to do things. Capitalism is inhumane. You teach people that the most important thing is profit and money for them, rather than compassion for other human beings and a kinder world. That's all for today. But this has been Capitalism Hits Home, brought to you by Democracy at Work, and I urge you to join us. Stay up to date with the latest Democracy at Work announcements and programs and merchandise. Go to www.democracyatwork.info. Join our mailing list. Join us. I want to also thank you, all those who support us financially and who support us by listening and by sharing these programs. Thank you so much. Goodbye for now.